it's easy to get bogged down. And there's certainly times where you have things are better or worse, but I think when you get to the end and you're like, hey, that dream is really there. And when I talk to students or people going through tough times, like a lot of that journey, the decisions you make along the way, the struggles to get into med school, even to figure out if it is for you, and then once you do, to pursue that, like you really have to hold that dream out and own it and believe in it and say, like, this is where I want to go. Like, I want to be a neurosurgeon and scientist. So when I'm in the lab and doing my work, like it has meaning, and I'm not going to lose sight of that just because I'm on here. And I think when you have that type of meaning, then you can have a really wonderful and full life.
Dr. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
How has, is it safe to say post-pandemic? All right, like, are we still in it? Like, as a healthcare provider, post-pandemic, how has work-life balance been for you these days?
It's good. It's back to normal. Even just in the last month, the CDC changed their guidelines, so we no longer have to mask at the hospital, and it's feeling like we're truly getting back to like life was before the pandemic.
Yeah. To provide some context to our listeners, we met on a whim in the locker room, and you gracefully and graciously made space for me. You're just like, we got to share this space. We're in a tight spot, and one thing led to another. We started talking about your experiences as an EMT, or like, you were an EMT, and like I said pre-recording, it's just like I hesitate to bring this podcast up to strangers, but being at Northwestern once a week, I felt like it was trying to capture a lightning bolt in a bottle, and asked if you wanted to come on. I don't know too many neurosurgeons, and a lot of our EMT students have hopes and dreams. Some even proclaim neurosurgery as an aspiration, and the goal for this episode, it's not going to be too deep into neurosurgery per se, but more so your journey, your personal journey to get there, and maybe like what the work-life balance is at the moment, things that you wish you knew going into it, things that you wish you learned earlier, just so we can have some path for people to try to follow if they were to try to aspire to something similar. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So growing up, let's maybe high school. Like what were some formative like experiences that cultivated healthcare or medicine or healing or helping people for you? Were you parents or school or?
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up in Indianapolis in the Midwest. My family was I think one of our values as a family was really caring for other people.
Okay.
My dad was a pastor that was kind of ingrained in the system that like people matter and relationships matter. And I think when I think of the core values that sort of led me to medicine, that sort of started it. And it wasn't so much something that was a spouse. Well, it was a spouse, but the relationships and the people matter so much more than chasing after everything in the world that the world has to offer and that culture has to offer. And so for me, it started in high school when college came up. And the question was, how do you want to spend your life? What do you want to study in college? And I was a kid hanging out, and I was like, I like to hang out with my friends, and why do people do what they do? And so I took a psychology class in high school. In my senior year, I could take some classes in the local college, and it was really interesting talking about personality types and all of this stuff. But as I got into it, I realized that it was very descriptive. And I wanted to understand some of the why as I was grappling with things, as any teenager is doing, like what is going on in life. And that's really what started my intrigue into neuroscience and all of that. And so that was the first cues that started. And so when I went to college, I studied neuroscience for undergraduate and began to try to understand, how do we work? How does our mind work? where does consciousness arise from? I got into reading some of these books, even going back to like Descartes with mind-brain duality. Is it truly just a material world that our consciousness evolves out of? And was into that for a while and some of those philosophical things. And one of the things that really attracted me to medicine is I felt that it was when you care for someone as a doctor, in my perception and what I'm discovering now on the end of that journey, a long journey, is that it's very tangible. It's something where I can reach out and actually help you. And a lot of times, as people go through things in life, they're actually experiences that we go through in our development, in our journey, in our career development, in discovering who we are as a person. And with medicine, and what ultimately I think began to lead me where I ended up in neurosurgery is, as a surgeon, I can help you in a physical and meaningful way, in an important way, in an impactful way. And I think a lot of physician specialties can do that. Some are extremely tangible, like surgery, where you cut into somebody, take out a tumor, like I do on a day-to-day basis. Some are much harder, where you're trying to, help someone change behavior. That's a lot harder. That takes a lot longer. And I think those roles that started in the value of caring about other people, that came from a religious background and exposure to that culture, for me, sometimes those were more ethereal and harder for me to put my hands on and always appreciate and understand. And so what I could do, though, and learn in those values, I think that were internalized by being in that culture and growing up in that environment, and in a way that wanted me to provide where I wanted to provide meaning for myself and impact other people in a meaningful way, really attracted me to medicine. Because a lot of the spiritual things, the philosophical things, the consciousness type things, like you can't answer those questions when you dive into them. But caring for someone at the medical level is very tangible. You have an infection, I can give you antibiotics. You have a tumor, I can take it out. And it's really important for people. And so to me, I think that's what really led me in that direction.
It seems like you is there a space to acknowledge or appreciate both sides, like the spiritual and the tangible, with your like, do you have this similar discussion with your patients?
Yeah, it's something that's really evolving. So I've been in practice now about 2 years. My neurosurgical practice is almost totally brain tumors. I don't do any spine surgery. So it's a very different set of patients. These patients have all come down with some type of brain tumor, whether it's a pituitary tumor, tumor on their hearing nerves, whether it's in the skull. I deal with a lot of benign tumors, but they grow and cause problems.
What are some signs and symptoms that they might be experiencing?
Most commonly are things, so they present really simply, either mass effect, so a large tumor compressing the brain, which can cause headaches. If it's along the top of the brain, can cause seizures. Or they can be small tumors, but they are on the cranial nerves, which are the nerves that go from our brain out into our face and give us all of the senses that we have: sight, taste, smell, swallowing, chewing, face movement, hearing, balance.
Okay.
If you have a small tumor pressing one of those nerves, it can cause any of those symptoms.
Okay.
Or weakness one side of the body, that kind of thing. No one signs up for that in their life. And so what I've begun to appreciate, and one of the ways that I really enjoy caring for people, is trying to help them gain a sense of control, because when that happens to you as a patient, you have no control. This isn't like, oh, I did this and therefore I had a brain tumor. Almost everything we do, we don't know why they got that tumor. Sometimes you got radiated as a kid for something, or there's clear causes, but most of the time there's not a clear rhyme or reason. And so that patient is facing something where it's like, why did this happen to me? They're asking that.
Sure.
And so part of what my job is as a doctor at this point is to help them say, hey, this is what's happened. We don't know why. Here's how I can deal with that and help you, which is in a tangible way, but also giving them some power and some control over this, because it is out of their control. But how you respond to it is in your control. And so trying to take that sense of helplessness, that sense of fear, give a patient an understanding of their disease. Why are they experiencing what they're experiencing? And then when I talk with them, try to help frame that in a way that they can see this as a part of their life that they can go through, not an overwhelming thing, not something that's impossible to handle. Because if I say, hey, I'm going to, open up your head, take off some of the skull, go underneath, work right next to your optic nerve, all these things that I do on like a day-to-day basis, it's incredibly scary. But if you can break that down and then say, hey, this is what's going on with the disease. This is why you're feeling what you're feeling. This is what we can do about it. And then usually at the end of kind of developing a surgical plan, or after surgery as they're starting to think about it, it's like, hey, we got to monitor, is this going to come back? But really I try to frame it in like, this is a chapter of your life. And I think when we talk about training, one of the things that I've realized, especially in the last couple of years, as I've sort of made it to the end of the training part, and now I'm in my professional practice career, is being able to look back and see those events and things that I went through in my life as different chapters. And they all kind of lead up to here. But there's a lot of uncertainty along the way. And I think all of, people that are thinking about this, and myself included at different stages, there's uncertainty. Is this for me? Can I do this? Do you have, how can you do that? You have setbacks. You do poorly in a class, and like, is it all over? Those are kind of things, but it's similar to like what the patient is going through. And as you have a little more perspective and experience, it's like, hey, this is a chapter in your life. Sometimes it's going to be the last chapter if it's a uncurable brain cancer, and we help them with that. But helping people see this, and a lot of the tumors I treat are more benign, so they cause problems, but we can fix it, but there may be consequences from that. And then there's going to be a long time after the surgery where their life goes on. And so trying to help them have a sense of control. And I often use the analogy of a chapter like, hey, you didn't, 2 weeks ago, before you had that seizure, you had no idea this was brewing in your head for the last couple years.
Yeah.
You found out about it because it's a seizure, and this is a chapter. And there's going to be a part of the chapter where we go through treatment that's going to need to be surgery, going to need to be radiation. And then there's going to be a part where you carry this with you. So even if everything goes perfectly, we got to monitor for this for the rest of your life. This is part of who you are as a person, because all the things that happen to us or that we choose to do in our lives, like that's what creates who we are. That's why we're constantly changing and evolving.
It's like escaping that victim mentality.
Yeah, and also putting it in perspective that like this isn't going to define them. It will be a part of who they become. Who you become, just like all of the events in our life. But when you get a diagnosis like a brain tumor, I mean, this is who I am, this is my brain, like all reasonable and valid fears, but trying to help people get control and a sense of themselves through that.
Did that perspective come from your own personal experiences and readings, or do they emphasize this in school?
No, this part of things, it's interesting. I think about this a lot because one of my goals, one of the things that I strive to do is to really be a terrific doctor, not just a surgeon. So as a neurosurgeon, the type of doctor there's a lot of technical demands. There's technique, there's practice, there is understanding. Like there's a lot that actually goes in technically. But when I think of a physician or a doctor, it's someone who actually really cares for patients. And I think to loop back to the start of the conversation, I think that's what started in the environment where I was exposed to, where you value people, where you value relationships, where you really care for another person. And so I can do that through what I do technically, but that evolves. That, like being a doctor, is something that evolves, and it's something that I've always felt, and I don't know why.
I think I get a very I get a feeling that our students, our EMT students, have a very romantic view of medicine, and they all have genuine reasons of like wanting to help people. And I'm trying to be the devil's advocate in the sense that there are many other industries aside from healthcare where you can help people. And they have to be specific in the sense that they want to help people who are sick or injured. And because as a wedding photographer, I put on boutonnieres on people's jackets. I help people, right? And like, so there's many ways to help people, but in what capacity do you want to help people?
I think, I think that's an interesting point, and it's something, that I think all of us, when we want to find a meaningful career, a meaningful way to spend our life, it also pays the bills, and you do that. If you're a business owner and you create a livelihood for 50 other people, like you're supporting 50 families, like that's, I can help one patient in the operating room at a time. Like, there are a lot of ways to find meaning. And I think you're absolutely right. Like understanding that environment of you're taking care of someone who is sick, you're seeing traumatic things. When we talk about gun violence or something and people see it, like it's very different than when I'm like actually taking bullets out of people's heads and trying to save their life, and you see the real effects of that. It's you're so close to some of these traumatic things, or patients struggling with brain tumors, or their mortality because it's a fatal brain tumor, and then the uncertainty of like, how long will I survive? I mean, so it takes a certain type, and within medicine I think there's room for everyone. Even within neurosurgery, some people don't want to have the conversations or do the things that I do, and it's better to oh, you got a pinched nerve in your arm, I'll take that disc out. They really help the patient, and then the patient goes on with their life. Whereas like a brain tumor patient and that type of thing, there's a closer relationship there. I don't know why it is. It's just it's part of the nature of the diagnosis, the nature of the relationship of going into someone's head. I don't know.
Well, it's very intimate.
That's the way I see it. It's very intimate. And
are your patients under complete anesthesia, general anesthesia usually?
Most of the time. I do a few awake cases where if the tumor's involving a speech area, I have some partners who specialize in that. I specialize in some of the more other types of tumors, surgery around the skull base, things like that. So I often will partner with them for those cases, but I do some myself. But the vast majority are asleep.
Is there any part of the work-life balance, the day-to-day, that you wish you knew? Because I feel like depending on what system you work for, there can be some restrictions, or it's very bureaucratic. You want to be the best provider you want to be, but maybe they have certain numbers that they need to hit, certain metrics they need to hit, certain number of patients you have to see, certain dollar figures you have to hit. We're not naming any companies in specific. I'm just saying in general, I think growing up, we have this romantic view of what it's like to be a physician, and then you enter the industry and maybe it's a surprise. Did you have that feeling at all?
I think you'd be blind to not have that feeling. Like those are real challenges. And one of the interesting things, like at this stage where I'm a couple years into practice, where you're not chasing the next rung. You're not like, I'm not just like trying to get into med school or finish undergrad or, get into residency, the residency I want, that kind of things. Like I've passed those journeys, and you have a little chance to reflect. And I think that's as I've been doing that, it's one of the things I wish I knew earlier on, is that like the mentality that the system of education often creates is to like a striving, insecure, like I'm not there to the next, how am I going to get there?
It's very competitive.
Work so hard. But when I think about things that I experienced stressful, and I noticed that like some of my colleagues or different people along the way, they didn't struggle as much, or they didn't, not so much like from an academic standpoint, but from this balance. And I think there's a mental and emotional maturity that comes of just being comfortable with who you are, where you're at, what you're doing, and the mission that you're doing. And if you understand that along the way, you can construct some of those boundaries and try to separate the challenges of the profession, the challenges of working in a horribly broken healthcare system. It's a terrific system. We provide world-class care. I'm proud of what I do. But when my patients are like, I can't do this because I can't afford it, or we're going through 3 hoops, or I'm, getting an MRI denied because it's an orbit's not a brain, and I have to talk to a non-radiologist about, like, those things are incredibly frustrating. The same things, the metrics you talk about, like, do you have to see so many patients, hit so many things? If you dive in and let that consume you, you can burn out very easily. And sometimes in some systems it's structured that you can't help that. But I also think that if medicine is something that you care about, that you love, if you take on that doctor, that romanticized view, and say, I'm here to help patients. And there's challenges in every job. If you're a business, you've got to have dollars coming in more than are going out. Otherwise, you're not going to have your business very long. If you're an ambulance company and you can't get reimbursed for your rides, and you're, there's no way you can pay the staff. Like, there's that's the reality of every industry. That's working in the world. And the people that I see that really love what they're doing are either structure their lives, take jobs that allow them to do that, to still enjoy being a doctor, or make sacrifices, or what I'm realizing is, even more so with time, is it's also a mental attitude that, like, I am a doctor, and I can sit there and say, like, did you hit your metrics? Did you do enough surgeries? Did you meet X, Y, or Z? Or like, hey, I'm here to help people. Who can we help today? And these patients need me, and they need me to care for them. And if you keep focused on that, you derive a lot of meaning. Do you have challenges? Absolutely. Are there struggles? Are there emotionally difficult things to do on top of the bureaucratic stuff? Yeah, of course. But that's like, we have to keep the hospital running. We've got to keep the lights on. There's a balance. Everybody's fighting for the last dollar, like, that's part of the real world.
I really appreciate that. Yeah.
But it's a mental thought process that, like, you have to be conscious about creating for yourself, because it's very easy in a world where everything is on Instagram, where you see someone who has more than you, no matter what you have, unless you're the top dog, unless you're Jeff Bezos, or he's probably got bumped by Elon Musk now, or, like, everybody, there's always somebody who has more, who has better, whether it's more time, more money, better family, healthier, more in shape. Like, and it's thrown in our eyes all the time. And when we look to that, or you're frustrated by the metrics or the challenges of doing your job, and you don't just say, like, well, these are the things I have to hit, and how do I do that? Then you get burned out, because you can never keep up, and the world is too fast-paced. But if you can take a step back and say, and medicine is for you, and you love it. Like, I love it. I love being a doctor. I love caring for the patients. And I love sitting down with them, hearing their stories, getting to know. Like, I get to sit down with, 20 people in a day, all of who are facing challenging things, and say, where are you at? Who are you? Why did you get here? How has this affected your life? Then empower them and say, hey, this is how we can help you, or this is how I can't help you, but you don't need this, and don't let somebody operate on you because you don't need that. And you hear these stories. You meet people who are wealthy, and they are donors to theaters and are doing things like that. You meet people who are homeless and on the streets, who have the craziest of tumor, or people who have been just every spectrum of the walk of life. Like, the things that I dreamed of when I was like, hey, I don't want to be in this environment where everybody has to put on a perfect face, be perfect. And, like, sometimes you get in some religious settings and you get hypocrisy and these types of things, and you say, hey, if you have a brain tumor, it doesn't really matter. And I can relate to you and care for you. And you don't get to do that as a student. Sometimes you get little glimpses of it. You get little feelings along the way, little interactions that keep you going.
As a medical student,
a medical student, as an undergraduate, as somebody in training, trying to get to that step. It's really a dream you pursue, right?
Yeah.
And to get to this part at the end, and actually be doing that on a daily basis is awesome.
That scene in Patch Adams was, like, left a mark of, like, treating, as they were doing rounds, treating a patient as a human being, referring to them by their name, not their diagnosis, just, like, hits home and should be a prereq for every pre-med.
Well, and it's a mark of a good doctor, but it's hard, and you got to be competitive. You have to get good grades to get there, and you know
it's easy to lose sight of what you originally set out to do when you're bogged down with trying to gain admission to the next chapter or the next level.
Or you face the challenges of the industry or the
Yeah.
uncertainty
Yeah.
or barriers. You don't get in the first time.
Yeah.
You don't, I got a C in chemistry, I was worried, how is that going to affect me? Like how are these, these setbacks, or you have personal setbacks because you're on this demanding journey. And then, when I left, I graduated high school 20 years until I got my first job, and I didn't take a break along the way. So like life happens in that time period. You have personal setbacks, you have loss, you have all the challenges and yet you've still got to like keep showing up every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's easy to get bogged down, and there's certainly times where you have things are better or worse, but I think when you get to the end and you're like, hey, that dream is really there. And when I talk to students or people going through tough times, like a lot of that journey, the decisions you make along the way, the struggles to get into med school, even to figure out if it is for you, and then once you do, to pursue that, like you really have to hold that dream out and own it and believe in it and say, like, this is where I want to go. Like,
Yeah.
I want to be a neurosurgeon and scientist. So when I'm in the lab and doing my work, like it has meaning, and I'm not going to lose sight of that just because I'm on here. And I think when you have that type of meaning, then you can have a really wonderful and full life for yourself, because your success is defined like, am I meeting that goal? Not
for yourself. Yeah.
For yourself. Like,
Yeah.
I want to be a good doctor. If I go home at the end of the day and I'm, you're struggling, but hey, I was a good doctor for those patients. I took care of them surgically in the way that, like in a world-class way that I'm proud of what I can do and what I
Yeah.
did for them. Or I said, hey, this is a surgery. I know a better surgeon for you. I'm going to send you to that person. Like really caring to do that, then you're satisfied.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, absolutely. Can you speak on your experiences, like with the competitive nature of applying to med school? I remember some of my instructors a few years ago applying in the middle of the pandemic, and it was just so chaotic. And it's just that feeling of potentially not getting in that cycle and waiting, and getting all your ducks in the row to feel as ready as possible to be a good candidate for med school. And there's so many good candidates that don't make it maybe that cycle. But there's so much pressure, maybe for themselves, maybe from their parents, external factors. Like, what was it like for you when you were applying to med school? Because I know people that would, let's say, get diagnosed with ADHD when they don't have ADHD, and get a prescription for Adderall, and then just compromise themselves in order to achieve this. And they're sacrificing themselves.
It's a challenge. And my experience was 20 years ago. It is an undergrad, and I graduated in 2004, so I started in 2001. And I don't know all the details. The MCAT, some of that stuff has changed a bit, even how it's done. But when I think about going through it, it's a challenge. And there's a lot of different benchmarks. You talk to your pre-med advisor, those kinds of things, say, hey, this is what you need to do. I think holding on to the dream, and then also staying focused on strategically on things that will build a story, that will build your application. So one of the things that I've tried to do that I did throughout my training, was try to gain experiences that helped me accomplish my life and like what I needed to do at that time, but then also built for the future. And EMT was actually one of those. Like when I was in high school, I was like, yeah, I'm interested in neuroscience and pre-med, and I had that summer between high school and college. So I signed up for an EMT class, and I got BLS certified.
Who introduced you to that?
I don't even remember.
If it wasn't for my co-founder, Marty, like I would have known about this industry and what it is to be an EMT. I would have never known.
I don't know.
We have 17-year-olds sometimes to 55-year-olds. And when we introduced ourselves a few weeks ago, she was like, I'm studying for my AP exams. I'm like, oh my God, AP exams. And then last semester, our valedictorian was an attorney, and she has a summer home, and response times are long, and she wanted to know what to do in case of an emergency. And for whatever your motivations are to becoming an EMT, it's beautiful. And I think whether you're currently in high school, undergrad, or haven't been in school for 10 years, everyone has something to bring to the table.
It's funny, as I think about the memories start to come back a bit. So in high school, I actually volunteered in the hospital.
Okay.
And because I was interested in medicine. It was one of my friend's dad was an OB-GYN, and I really admired him. He was a very decisive individual. It was something that I wanted to emulate, and he actually let me go see a couple laparoscopic surgeries and that kind of thing. And so then I was volunteering in the hospital in high school. And I think that's when I first got exposed to the emergency room and started thinking about like what would be some of the ways that I could get clinical experience more than just as a volunteer.
Yeah.
And because they often talk about that, like, oh, you need clinical experience, but like everybody's starting, how do you get experience when you have no experience, or no certification or no skills, right? So that, I think it was through that when I was working down at Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis that I got the idea to be an EMT and to do the class. And so I did the coursework, did the clinicals and the ride-alongs and stuff. And then when I started undergraduate, I was looking for a job that could get me clinical experience to use my EMT. And I basically, we didn't, I had shirt and shoes and house, but, a place to live, but we didn't have a lot of means. So like if I wanted a cell phone in college, you needed a job to pay for your cell phone, and like kind of that way along the whole way. And so I was looking for like, how can I make some money to make all this work? And then so EMT fit in, and the way I started doing it is I got a job at one of the hospitals near the college I was at in the emergency room as a tech. And so I essentially worked as, I think the equivalent of like a CRNA would be basically what I was doing, but you'd be seeing patients, you go in, you get to talk to them.
A CNA or CRNA?
Not CRNA, CNA. Thank you. No, please, all the nurse anesthetists. No, that was trying to put myself further back in time. A CNA, like a nursing aide.
Yeah. That's funny because back then, that role as an ER tech, from my perspective in Chicago, is a position that you're competing with paramedics for the job. So it was kind of unheard of as an EMTB, especially an inexperienced EMTB, to get a tech role. These days, it's so short that every hospital is kind of like, yes, you want to come in, come in. Was that a similar experience to you, or not really?
I went in and I talked to this manager. I saw the job and I called him and like walked over to the hospital and got in, and he met me and was like, hey, this seems like a decent guy or whatever. Like, we'll give him a shot. I don't remember those details, but somehow I got the job. So Friday nights I'd work like the 3 to 11, Friday and Saturday nights on the weekends. Yeah. And you'd see a lot of things, and definitely the most experience that's still burned in my mind is the first time I did CPR, because you're in the ER and, somebody loses their pulse and you're doing CPR for the first time, and you practice on the dummies and all that, but it's very different in real life, and feeling the ribs underneath you and being in the midst of that. It was a lot of.
So with those experiences, did you consider EM eventually, or not really, or?
I had that neuroscience inkling, and I was a neuroscience major. My undergrad program, one of the ways to get through honors was to do an undergraduate thesis, and they really pushed doing research. And I got interested in that and stayed in the neuroscience path. I thought about emergency medicine. I liked it. It was fun, but I was kind of sold on neuroscience from the beginning, and it was an internal curiosity.
From your peers, have you heard experiences where, going into medical school, they have an initial aspiration of a certain niche, and then it kind of just pivots after a certain experience?
Yeah, I would say I'm by far the minority. I think most people just switch. And some people, I would say there's probably, 10, 15, 20% at most of people that are like, hey, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon, and they become a neurosurgeon. Yeah. A lot will switch out to other things, or you see the demands of the life, the demands of the training, or they just fall in love with something totally elsewhere, or they get in the OR and they're like, I don't like this culture at all, or this,
Isn't that
in a
wild
work
though?
environment.
How there are subcultures within different niches, and your experiences during your rotations are formative. And if you had a negative experience with someone who's supposed to nurture you and train you, and this is across every industry, hospitality to medicine. It's like you could have gained a valuable peer, and you treating me this way makes me want to go in the opposite direction.
And the same,
Yeah.
where like along the way, I had really good mentors
Okay.
that, took me under their wing, gave me opportunities, where my personality I could just be how I was, and where there was opportunity to do research that would, set you up and help you get over those rungs, or get to that next level of where you wanted to go in your career.
Yeah.
I think it's equally important both ways.
Yeah.
I went in with a lot of curiosity to all the specialties.
That's
but,
key though. Yeah.
and I liked them all because, and as I reflected on it, at the end, I really came back to neurosurgery where I had started. Like, this is what I wanted. But being a doctor is an amazing thing. And I think it's very easy to lose sight of that in modern medicine and healthcare in America, which has so many issues. But that thing, it's amazing. And when you go through different specialties and you see psychiatry, you see, like, inpatient psychiatry blew my mind. Like, what we joke sometimes, probably inappropriately, like, oh, I have OCD or something like that. But when you see, like, inpatient psychiatry, like, the breadth of what people can go through, it just opens your mind in a way that, it's remarkable. And it's interesting. And if you could help someone in those situations, either terrible depression, mania, schizophrenia, like things that if you're not exposed to it in your life, it's hard even to imagine.
Yeah.
And I think the same, like, I enjoyed general surgery. I enjoyed internal medicine. Like, all these things are interesting. I did a high-risk OB rotation where I got to deliver twins vaginally, or I was there
Wow.
with the doctor, not the med student alone, but like incredible life experiences that you see along the way. But ultimately, when I came back, is the brain and surgery. I think in medicine, people will usually they are more a medicine or a procedural specialist, and as you're trying to figure that out, like. That's sort of the first step people have to figure out.
Can you elaborate? How but is that just the rotations or shadowing or like what?
No, I think that's who you are as a person.
Oh, okay,
Because
okay.
where you choose your specialty, so undergrads, you say, hey, do I like medicine? So get clinical exposure. For EMT, you're taking care of these patients. You're like, this is really cool. I want to go to the next level. I want to be a medic. I want to actually be able to do ACLS. Yeah. And then if you're, doing that and you're like, hey, this is great, but I want to go to nursing school and do CRNA actually, or whatever you want to do, or, advanced, like you want to go to med school, and then, but within med school, like, you're either a proceduralist where you're working with your hands, you do something where, like, at the end of the day, you had this, you didn't, or you're more of a medicine doctor where you're trying to figure out what's going on, where you're trying to manage a long-term thing, where you're trying to change behaviors, get patients to take their medication so they can keep their blood pressure down, where the game is a 30-year game, like stroke prevention.
Yeah.
It's a little different mindset.
That's very good. I've never heard that perspective. It sounds crucial though. Yeah, it's a lot of self-awareness, which is what I try to preach in this class as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. I liked, when I was in high school, I did a lot of construction and I loved it.
Oh.
Like, I often consider myself more blue collar, like on the inside.
Sure,
and, we
sure.
did finish work and put in commercial kitchen and tiling and cabinetry and countertops, all this kind of stuff. And for a couple summers, and I loved the work, the beauty, the art, putting things together. And I think those, like, tactile feedbacks, like, I do the same thing. Like, what I do is very hands-on. Like, there's a tumor, I open you up, I take it out, I put you back together, make you look like yourself, this is things that bring you joy. And I think for trainees along the way, as you're having these experiences, even if you're not in med school or residency, and you just developing a self-awareness and a contentment along the way with who you are and where you're at in the journey. I think that's one thing, if I could go back and tell myself, I would have maybe had a more enjoyable journey, developed better as a person at different times, if I had been able to develop that. an appreciation of where you're at, and then some time to say, hey, I do like this. So maybe, that type of thing. And I think good mentors bring that out in you.
Yeah.
They help you see what you're going through and say, hey, you're just starting out your career. You're not supposed to have a giant 401k and like have your life all set for retirement. Like these things take time. Like life is a journey. You're just starting out, but hey, I notice you're like this. Or when I was in the lab, I loved doing these little procedures where we studied pancreatic islets, and I was trying to figure out how to turn stem cells into pancreatic islets when I was in my PhD. And you'd have to do, like, we're doing all this science, and I was loving the parts where you had to inject like a mouse bile duct, which is super tiny and gets the islets to come out. It's like a really kind of persnickety technical thing. And I was like, man, I could just sit and do this all day. And the other people are like, this is so boring. I want to discover something exciting with the science. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. I can, do these little procedures and like those insights into yourself. But you only get that by doing the experiences, by being present and pursuing these things and creating opportunities that, like I said, that build and into a coherent application or something, some clinical opportunity, some research opportunities, different things, and then do it in a way for me that was really important to sustain life. So could I get paid doing it? Could I, and oftentimes, working was good. I like to work. So
can you speak on what makes a good personal statement? Because I feel like some people won't have a good personal statement unless they experience some type of trauma in their earlier life, something to draw from, something to rise from the ashes like a phoenix. But like, some people feel like it's too mediocre if they didn't experience some type of trauma on their personal statement.
It's an interesting question, because we actually, when we reviewed residency applications, you meet some people that are just, you're like, oh my God, how did you live this life?
Right.
Or like you went through these crazy traumas, these crazy family things, life changes. What about people who had like a more suburban, they didn't have this trauma happen to them? And I think...
But what if some people now start making stories up?
If you lose your integrity along the way, you're never going to be happy with your career. As a physician, I don't think so. And I think, we talk about like, what is it that I enjoy being a doctor? What brings that fulfillment and that meaning? It's being true to who I am as a person, that personal integrity. And if that's gone, like if you're lying, you're making stuff up, everybody figures out their way. I never did like the Adderall and stuff, and I wondered, but I knew students in undergrad who were like, oh, before the test, they just stayed up for 2 days using Adderall, and they killed it. Mm-hmm. And they got into med school and did just fine and are good people, But it was like an integrity that for me, that wasn't the way I was going to function. And I think if you're lying, like the way to connect with people, the way to connect with my patients is honesty and openness and like genuineness. And if you don't have that and you're caring for somebody and you don't care, they understand. And we know that. I don't know what it is neurologically or neuroscience-wise, but people know that. And I think it's, that integrity is essential. And it's something that, we wonder, and, you see in the news when officials are like, hey, are they lying about things? Are they telling about their background? And I think it'd be horrible to lie on a personal statement. Mm-hmm. And it's something that catches up with you. And it's a pattern, like, in my mind, it's an absolute non-starter.
Yeah.
Like, honesty, your integrity, like, to do what we do, to take on the risks, to accept the trust that people put in me as a neurosurgeon, to go in their head and like fix them and get them through this. And if something happens, to get them through that. Like, I just think it's an absolute non-starter to make up a statement, because I think it's also a reflection that like undervalues your experience. Just because, my daughters have a couple young girls, and they're like, I'm bored, Papa, I'm bored. And like, I'm like, don't say boring. And so the older daughter now tells the younger, you don't say bored. That just means you're not curious about the world,
I love that.
Because, and I think if you were saying like, I've got to lie to make something up on my personal statement, I think you're not reflecting your experience. Like, just because you didn't go through surgery, or you didn't have a tumor, or you didn't have your mom die, or like, you've lived 18 years of life. Yeah. Like, are you aware of what's going on? How have you impacted other people? Why do you want to do medicine? Like, so you didn't have trauma, but you can say, like, this is why I'm interested, because this is the meaning that I'm seeking in my life. And, you know, if you've had that kind of life and you know, that didn't have a major trauma, that's wonderful. Like, that's what I hope for my kids. Yes, resilience makes you stronger. Yes, those things happen, but like, I don't want them to suffer. And if you have situations in life where you didn't have crazy suffering, or you had suffering that you can't share about because it's too deep, it's too personal, it's too hurtful.
Yeah.
And how do
It's
you...
kind of like bringing up PTSD. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that in every interview. You don't want to do that like, oh my God, this, you know, and you're like, I can't do that. Like, you still can reflect on what got you there. And I think, you know, nuts and bolts, a personal statement shouldn't be too long. Keep it under a page. A little brief introduction, something to grab the reader, what your goals are, what your vision is, and then what you hope to accomplish at the next stage. I think that's where people leave a lot out. Like, you highlight things that aren't in your application, that aren't going to be obvious on paper. Like, you know, hey, I really enjoy this, or I found meaning out of that, or I had a real connection with patients, or I had this. And a personal statement isn't going to make or break it. Sometimes the ones that are really dramatic stories certainly do. They open doors. Is it like, wow, yeah, of course. But also someone who's shown up every day, had a good life, been the Eagle Scout, whatever, you know, life didn't throw them those curveballs yet. It will happen. It happens to all of us. Put that out there. Put what you valued about that. Share a little bit about yourself, your integrity, why you've done what you've done, how you've protected yourself, how you've made choices that didn't introduce trauma into your life, and then why you want to be a doctor, and what you hope to gain in med school. And I think that's a part that I see a lot of people miss. They're just like, they want to get to the next rung, but they don't really understand. Like, you read a statement where it's like, my vision is to train with people who are like going through this, and we're working together and learning the skills. And I want to go to medical school, or to this medical school, or this residency, or I want to be in an environment that will give me the opportunity to do research and to pursue my dream. And I see that you've got that vision out there, that you're like, hey, I want to be a doctor who cares for patients like this, who has this skill set, and I don't have that now. And you put that on paper. It doesn't have to be that you went through something horrendous, right? In fact, you may be a well-balanced person who's had the gift of not having to go through horrendous trauma, or has gone through it and just doesn't want to share it every interview, and just says, hey, this is where I'm at. And keep it bland. Don't say anything. I mean, be yourself, whatever, put it out there. But like, this is also a professional setting, and we want people who are going to carry themselves wherever they come from, whatever background they have, however they look, in a professional manner, because part of professionalism is when you're connecting with patients and you're being there, you're there for them. And I put my family, I put everything else, kind of put that over here, and then I'm here as your doctor. I'm here as your surgeon. And that's sort of that Hippocratic oath, that commitment to the patient. Because if you come to me for surgery, you're trusting me with your brain, your body, this experience. And I think my job is to honor that trust and get you through that experience, and whatever comes with it. There's no free lunch. There's risks to everything we do, and you're taking it on. You're trusting me to get you through that. This is not a 9-to-5 sign-in, sign-out job with what I do.
Yeah.
Different parts of medicine you can't. Anesthesiology, right? You have that same relationship with the patient, but it's structured differently. And and that's kind of those things where you realize what do you appreciate taking on? What do you want? That as you have more and more experiences, you find your niche within medicine, into a specialty, and then within a specialty, Yeah. And so I don't know. That's where it comes together.
That makes sense. Yeah. Reflection, self-awareness, and acknowledging what you have been through, and without sacrificing integrity.
Yeah, and reflecting and developing a sense of self and who you are, and medicine is a part of that. That's something that we all grow with, that we evolve over time, right? Yeah. Many times, many parts of my life, is very immature, because it's just, I've got to be a doctor, a med student, get this done. Like I'm going. And you lose some of those other things, that the development of the other roles that you play, and then the things that who you are if those things are taken away.
What's been the greatest skill that you've cultivated in your pre-med phase? One that comes to mind is time management. But is there anything else that comes to mind that led to your success with discipline and stuff like that?
I don't know. Each person is different. It's funny you mentioned time management because it's something I still work on.
Same.
I was a crammer and I needed so much pressure, and maybe that's why I like the OR, because it's a specialty where you have that pressure to perform, and then it's time to perform. You know, like.
But as a pre-med, you're juggling many things, right?
You're juggling so many things. You're trying to check all these little boxes.
Yes.
Experience. Oh, you only volunteered for 4 hours? Well, you're like, I was trying to buy a pair of shoes and pay my cell phone bill, man. Like, what am I supposed to do? You know? Like,
and you just gotta take care of yourself too.
You got to have some sense of balance, relationships. You know.
So even if it wasn't at the forefront of your mind, you have to have some type of time management skill, right?
I think figuring out how to study, and also like beginning to recognize things that didn't take as much work. Like for me, it's interesting. I think all of us come with different skill sets and things that are easy to learn and some things that are harder. And a lot of things can be learned, but the neuroscience just clicked. Like when they'd be talking about these pathways and places through the brain, it just made sense to me when I'd read it. So I could study that. And there's other things that like immunology to this day, like is still like, I don't know. It's cell biology. I know a lot about cell biology, gene trends, all these things, but like there's just different things in our mind that easily stick. And
so it's becoming aware of those things that come naturally.
And then also recognizing like, I need to really work at this. And it's important to get to the next step. Like, where I'm at now, like as you go along, you can create to combine the things you learn with the things that are easier for you to learn. And that's where I think you can have a really great career, because you're always pursuing, always pushing yourself.
This will separate you from the pack too.
Yeah, but along the way, you've got to do a lot of things to jump through these different hoops to balance it all, and like just understanding where to put your efforts in both, the things that you can do easily and well, and then the things that take a little more work, then you've got to put in that work. And being willing to do that, and just diving into experiences, I think not spending too much time worrying. We as people worry so much along the way, and when I cut back the worrying and I start doing and getting the work done, it's so much easier. And then you've accomplished something. And it's natural to discuss things, to talk back and forth with your friends, but like there can be a point where there's so much anxiety and career strategy. Or it holds you back, and you're like, well, you could have just gone out and spent like 4 hours. And when you actually do it, this is the bane of like social media and stuff, the scrolling, and you lose your time. You're thinking about other things. You're comparing yourself to other people. And then you didn't spend that time starting your podcast, teaching a class, getting out and doing stuff. And I think when I advise students, particularly ones who are undifferentiated, it's easy to see in retrospect, this is this path. And if you had a clear focus early on and a clear vision, but a lot of people are undifferentiated. They don't really know. And I always say, don't spend too much time worrying about being undifferentiated, but get yourself out there and get the experiences. If you're interested in neurosurgery, try to find a connection where you could meet a neurosurgeon, or you could do that. If you're interested in medicine, like for me, I had a connection. My friend's dad was a doctor. He said, oh yeah, sure, I'll let you come see a case.
That's another thing.
Take the opportunities that are there and actually do stuff, because the only way that we get to know ourselves is by having experiences, and then you see the experiences and you're like, well, that sucked, or this was good, or this is and then you see the stuff where it really clicks. And for me, I think a lot of that, I enjoy my role as a physician. I enjoy my role as a surgeon. And that comes through years of doing different things. And even within neurosurgery, how I ended up in tumor surgery and skull-based surgery, doing these really kind of intricate under the microscope surgeries, like I enjoy that. I have friends, they got to that late in their career, and they were training, or in their training in residency. One of my mentors, he's a spine surgeon now. He's, he was going to do what I do in the brain. And he's like, I was sitting there for 12 hours picking at this tumor. And I was like, there is no way I can do this. I am done. When you actually get to the point where you can do it a bit later in the training. And so then he went and did a spine fellowship, and now a world famous spine surgeon, really revolutionizing that field. But he, so you discover yourself by being there and doing it, for better or for worse. And then you can get to those places where you do things. But the scrolling, the comparing, the seeing everybody else's papers, and they have 5 papers, or they had a 3.9 and I only have a 3.7.
Right.
You look at all these things, and it just produces anxiety that is a problem in our society right now. And I think it's always been there, but it's so available to us.
Yeah. Any advice on seeking shadowing opportunities, especially for people that aren't as well networked, if they don't have a family friend or a neighbor? Any advice for that?
One of the things I remember in undergrad, like getting connected with the pre-med student organizations as an undergrad, there will be doctors who are investing in that, or there will be contacts there that can show you things. The other thing is doing stuff like research. Like if you try to find an opportunity in a medical research lab, or with a doctor doing clinical research or something like that, or if you're taking a year off, instead of just doing something else, work as a clinical research coordinator or something like that, where you get a little foot in the door that you didn't have. I had no access to neurosurgery, aside from thinking it'd be cool as a kid.
Right.
Or as a high school student, or even as an undergraduate. I was in neurosciences, but I didn't know anybody in neurosurgery. But I volunteered at our free clinic. I did different things like that along the way that could, you could contribute. Or I did the EMT thing where I was in the ER, and just getting exposure to medicine and that doctor experience, and, pursuing your interests, but also taking advantage of the opportunities, because you're absolutely right. They will be very variable. And in fact, your career success, it's nice to say, well, I did this, I did that, I got there. So much of it is taking advantage of the opportunities that are there. But if you're not engaged in the moment, you're not ready to take them, then of course, it's like the old chance favors the prepared mind. If you're actually working, you're doing the job, then opportunities will come around. But if you're not in the game, you're not working, you're, whatever it is, it may not be exactly what you wanted at that time. Even when I was in med school, I did research that's in a totally different area of neurosurgery than I do now. But I had a great mentor, and there were opportunities, and he was, it was terrific. And so taking advantage of that then got me to the place, and then my interest kind of evolved more into the tumor and biology, cancer biology, the stuff I study now.
With your mentor, is there something that you provided in value back to him, or did they see something in value of you? Like that relationship of mentor-mentee, it's different for many people, but how did it come to be then? Without making it too transactional, right? It's just you're investing in someone.
I think, so it's interesting. I took a certificate on mentoring recently in teaching, as trying to build my skills as a better teacher, a better mentor. And I think I think mentoring experiences can be improved in ways, as I've learned more about it in a formal setting, as opposed to just kind of the informal experiences. And it actually probably works a little better when it always starts almost transactional, I think. You can, and certainly in a way, if you don't have opportunity to create opportunity, I worked in a lab, I did research, I'd wash the dishes in the lab, I did other stuff. You put in, you make some contribution, you invest your time, and then they can help you. It's pretty rare, and when I think about my mentors, that the mentor got nothing out of me, essentially. I don't know, maybe it's a little crass, or I hope not disrespectful to any of them, but I provided things, I did research for them, you took care of stuff like that. And I think there's always that kind of thing, because, the mentor only has so much time.
Yeah.
And if they're going to invest in you, there are mentors that just invest in you because they love you or care about you, and those are rare and come along, and maybe through family, through other things. But, you can't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, take me under your wing, Maybe that will happen, but usually, again, it's by getting in there, taking advantage of an opportunity, doing some research, doing some writing, getting in a lab, TAing a course, you know, stuff like that. That then, you know, that person ended up writing a letter for my med school recommendation because I TA'd human physiology. Like, you get to build those relationships, and then once you have that relationship and you've created it, it can go on. Sometimes formal mentoring programs are available, which is really good, but there have to be like really clear expectations. And I think a lot of times I was sort of deluded and maybe even impaired my growth because I was waiting for that mentor to like take responsibility of me. Or like, I was like, you know, this is, the mentor should do this, right? I would want them to do that. And I didn't realize like the mentee's responsibility and like what my role is in both. You know, I function in both as a mentor and with senior people as a mentee. And like, I need to be the one to reach out and schedule the meetings, right? Like, I can't with my senior mentors, right? They're not going to just call me and say, hey, it's been a while, like, let's have some lunch and let's get together and talk about your career development. You know, you may have that sometimes in your life, but a lot of times if you want mentors, you as a mentee have to seek them out and then take initiative. And if you send like, hey, Victor, I want to learn how to do a podcast. Will you take me under your wing? And you say, okay, but you're busy. And then I send you an email and you say, okay, I'll set up a time to meet with you. And then I send you an agenda and say, these are the 4 things I want to discuss. Like, how do I get the right equipment? How do I do this? And then we sit down and we take 10, 15 minutes, get to know each other. And then here's our agenda. Like, I want to do a research project, or, you know, you've made it into neurosurgery. I want to go into neurosurgery. Can you sit down and talk to me for about 30 minutes of your time? And I'll say, sure. You know, so I'll give 30 minutes of my time, and then they come in with and say, hey, I have these 4, 5, 6 questions. And I say, yeah, this is what I did, or you should do this or that, or no, I don't have an opportunity for you to do this, but maybe I can connect you with that. But if the person doesn't email me, or we don't develop that contact, and it often takes multiple efforts by the mentee, but you have to seek these out. And it's not like there's some great angel out there, mentor, who's just going to be like, Victor, let me get you on, you know, here's how a podcast works. And I'll just throw in a few mics for you and like get you off the ground. Like, it takes you hustling and like being structured and then seeking out like, hey, I don't know how to do this. And it's interesting because this continues throughout your career. Like, there was a technique that I thought could really help some of my patients. And the director of our pediatric neurosurgery is a woman, and she's really a talented surgeon, and she does this, you know, flexible endoscopy technique where you can go around within the skull, and is very good at it. And I was like, I don't have those skills. So I said, hey, I want to learn how to do this. I think it could really help my patients. I could do surgery less invasively, which is what I want. So then I go and ask her, and I go to her course, and then she's like, yes. And then I say, hey, I have a patient. And I'm like, I think the patient could benefit. Will you come do the case with me? And she's like, of course. And so she's teaching me how to do this procedure in a safe way. We're getting the patient through it. The patient's having a better outcome, and I'm getting a skill set that I didn't have. And she's mentoring me in that regards, you know, but if I don't reach out, if I don't spend my Saturday and go to her course and get exposed to something new, like, I'm not going to grow. Yeah. And again, it's like getting back to how do you make that progress? Like, just jump in with the opportunities you have along the way at each stage.
Yeah. I like that. You're not wasting anyone's time.
Yeah, or your own.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's very easy to these days.
Fast forward to your time as a resident. Like, what was work-life balance during those times?
Work was life. What are you talking about? It was awesome. Okay. And, you know, I think medicine has come a long way and neurosurgery and all of medicine from what the people 20 years before me went through. Okay. There are work hour limitations. Sometimes they're followed, sometimes just their presence really structures that they're, you know, it's not abusive or things like that. If you compare it to 20 years ago, if you compare it to an 8-to-5 job, it's not an 8-to-5 job. Yeah. You know, we were up super early in the morning. You know, I'd get up at like 4:30. You're in by 5, sometimes earlier. On the weekends, if you have a lot of patients to see, maybe you come in at 3:30. There are 24-hour shifts. There's, you know, or 30 that turn into 36-hour shifts. There's, you know, you put in your time and you work really hard. But again, it's this attitude of like, are you going to get mad at the system of that? Or am I becoming a neurosurgeon? And the only way that I'm going to be a good neurosurgeon is if I see patients. So do I want to win the game, as we used to call it, when you had 0 consults for a part of a shift or something? Like, hey, I won the game during the day today, you know, or Do you want 10 consults where I had 10 decisions I had to make and 10 new scenarios I was presented with, and I had to go through that and staff when I have a mentored environment, like as a resident? So if you're in that hungry mode of like, hey, we're going to bring in this tumor, we're going to take care of this patient, we're going to help them. Everybody's blown this person off who has some terrible infection and they're destitute, and I'm going to work through their big stack of medical records and figure out what's going on so we know, because that's my job. When you have that attitude change and you understand that, it becomes a little more tolerable. And you're also people, just like you talked about the undergrads juggling things. Like when I was in residency, I ran my first half marathon, got into that. I was like, I have to do something to stay in shape. I learned to sail. I was in San Francisco, and before residency, I moved there a month early and like found a ragtag sailing club that was great people, and they had these boats, and they taught me how to sail, and I joined, and it was something I could afford. It wasn't, anything fancy, but we'd have beer can races around Alcatraz and like, really cool stuff where you learn a skill, you do something. And then I met my wife there, and we had time to develop a relationship. Was it hard? Yeah. Was it like she jokes when we met online, and she jokes that like, yeah, he was the first. It's just a guy who's like, well, I can see you these 3 days within the next week and a half, but I'm on call these 4 days, so I'm not going to see you because your life is a little more regimented. It's a little different, but life happens. Like you go through your 20s, right? In residency was my 30s. In undergrad and research, PhD, med school was my 20s. Residency was my 30s, and fellowship, and you figure out a way. It's a crazy life. You miss out on some things. There's certainly sacrifices. You're paid as a resident, which you're not as a med student, but you're not. You're not. I think in San Francisco, I was spending like 60% of my salary on rent, and then if your take-home salary, stuff that your financial advisor would say don't do, but like you get by. But you have a life, and it's a life that you chose, and if you lean into it and enjoy it, it's there. Is it normal? Is this an 8 to 5 where you have every weekend off? No. When you get a weekend off, you call it a golden weekend because you have a normal weekend. Like, so there's a commitment, but I would say
a commitment to yourself too, right?
It's a commitment to yourself, and there's also an acknowledgement of what you're trying to do. Like going back to that doctor-patient relationship, like. I'm asking you to trust me to take good care of you with who you are as a person, with your brain, with your basic functions. It's a risky thing. It's not going to be smooth 100% of the time. And like, what is the preparation that you're going to put in to get there? And if what's happened in countries where, like in some of the European systems where you don't have as much experience up front, then you're in training longer. You're under supervision a lot longer. And maybe you graduate, now you're the assistant professor, but you can't book a case by yourself because the full professor has to be there. So you open and close like a senior resident or something like that. There's no, in physical, technical things, there's no shortcut to experience.
Yeah.
And so surgery for sure is that way. And if you're doing neurosurgery where a case may take 12 hours, I get one experience in a day. If you're doing internal medicine where you can see 15 patients or 20 patients or 30 patients in a day, you make 30 decisions. You see 20 different diseases.
Yeah.
You get
more exposure.
You do that. Whereas like if I'm figuring out how to get to these different parts of the brain, get someone there safely and out, you got to learn the opening, you got to learn the closure, you got to get down there, you got to understand the process, the management of all these patients around the time of surgery. Like it takes longer to get to a level where it's appropriate for someone to trust you with that responsibility. And so I think that balance in training of saying like, hey, I'm hungry to go do an extra case, I'm going to stay later and go do that. Yes, you have to have some balance with your life. You do need to go on some dates and like build relationships and all these things that are important to who we are as people. But there also is a commitment that like, I want to be out on my own in 7 years. I want to be trustworthy for these patients, and I want to be competent. And if you're true about that and reflective and honest about that, to practice within what you can do really well, like that's a really big thing. And people, I don't know, I just see it. And the longer, like when I'm on this end, you realize the gravity of it,
Okay.
and like there's no, I can't look over my shoulder and be like, okay, now come in and do the hard part of the case. Like I'm the one to do the hard part of the case, and so you have to be ready to take that on. And I think to go through that training, you say, hey, I'm going to commit to this. Are there shortcuts? Are there things we can do? Eliminate work that's just work that you're doing as a resident? Sure. And I think programs are getting better at that. That's certainly from an educational standpoint something we do, but there's also no replacement for experience. Even some of the things that people talk about, like busy work, like actually seeing how the patients go through the hospital, understanding the social workflow, understanding what you need to get someone home, to take their medications correctly. Like if you don't understand that, then it's hard to prescribe appropriately or do things in a way that really provides the best care. So I think you have to understand all those aspects, and there's no shortcuts. Like it's.
Can you speak on the shortage of residency placement, like spots? Is that where does the shortage stem from? Like not enough mentors, not enough physicians to teach. Like what's
It's interesting. I think it's selective. Certain specialties have more applicants than spots.
Okay.
Others don't. I think emergency medicine, which used to be one of the most competitive, 15, 20 years ago, this past year in the match, they had like 20% unfilled spots. So there also is a balance between like the number of spots, the number of graduating people from North American medical schools, the number of foreign medical graduates, and all of that. It's a little beyond what I'm aware of some of these things. I find it interesting to read little things, but I'm by no means an expert in that.
If you were to apply to, residency programs, is there a breakdown of how many, like, your dream programs to mid, like what percentage? Because I hear like there were programs that, like were unfilled, or like certain programs that,
But maybe there was a reason.
I don't know. These are just rumors, right? So like I'm not sure. And but how do you would that applicant rather go through a program in their perspective that wasn't up to their ideal quality, or wait till the next cycle? I'm not,
That's an intensely personal decision,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, so when I was applying, I went to an MD PhD program. It's a dual degree. You get both an MD and a PhD. PhD time can be variable anywhere from, on an extreme short end, 2 or 3 years. Mine was 5 years, so it was 9 years after undergrad before I started residency. And it's something I wanted to do. And my undergraduate research had kind of set things up and sparked that in me.
Okay.
And a lot of people at the time would take a year off after undergraduate, or 2 years or 3 years, and work in the lab to get more research experience and then apply to an MD PhD program. I did undergrad in 3 years because I did summer schools, and I had some of those credits I did in high school, and was under financial pressure at the time. And when I applied, I wasn't the world's strongest applicant. I didn't have 10 papers. My MCAT score was a little below the MD PhD average. Like it was not like should match to med school somewhere, but not like, going to get into Harvard. I still have rejection letters from, actually I went to UCSF for residency, and they declined they didn't offer me a secondary or whatever, the second line where they take your $100
Back in med school?
Back in applying to med school.
Wow.
And so when I was applying, because it was a little bit of a stretch with my score, I didn't have a paper. I had done some research fellowships in the summer, in one fellowship in the summer in undergrad, but it hadn't turned into a paper yet. And my MCAT score wasn't going to take me there all on its own. So when I applied, it was a bit of a long shot. And so I actually went through that dilemma of like, what am I going to do? Because I ended up interviewing at 4 med schools. Initially, I got interviews at 2. And I remember it wasn't until, I can't remember the details, I think in the fall, sometimes you'd get like the first round of acceptances, and I didn't get any. And then I think it was like in February, I got accepted to med school. And then like maybe March or April, I got into one MD PhD program and was waitlisted at 2 others after getting 4 interviews from applying to like, can't remember, 16 places or something. So you're very real, like, are you going to make it? And are you going to get to that next step? And I think for me, I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. If I have to take a year off and do research, a lot of people do.
Okay.
That's fine. I ended up matching in Oregon, and it's worked out very well for me. I got a great scientific training, incredible medical training, and matched at UCSF, which was my number one. So the rest of I got upwardly mobile and sort of lucky in the later stages, but certainly went from a beginning stages there was no guarantees coming from, I went to University of Pittsburgh undergraduate, so it's not like a Harvard school or something. It's a great school, but it's not. It doesn't have that cachet of have MCAT score off the charts. You're 3.9 from Harvard with 2 papers. You're gonna, we'll take you in the MD PhD program.
Yeah.
So that's a decision each person makes along the way.
Okay, that makes sense. We're coming up on time soon, but I did want to ask you. We've had a few previous EMT instructors that were in med school, and then next thing we hear about them, they're maybe M1s, M2s, and they commit suicide. And it's not just our instructors. It made it personal to us, but medical students in general just face this really, really high pressure and stress. We've probably already spoken on this topic already in other ways, but what's your advice to someone thinking about these things, and how it relates to what they're experiencing in med school?
I'm sorry to hear about your friends, your acquaintances. It's something that we see. It's a real problem. It's a tragedy, and it's probably, I don't know. It's the words that come to my mind is it's a cultural failure, essentially, because there is all of the things that make me want to be really good for my patient, to be the best doctor, to do that competitiveness that in school, those things like learning techniques, getting really good with my hands, really being the best I can be, which is really important to pursue a surgical mastery, surgical excellence, being a terrific doctor. And I think this happens in other industries. But in medicine, we know it's higher rates of suicide for doctors and dentists. And I don't know all the issues, but I hope people get help. I think that's why when I think back to myself on my journey, when, thoughts would creep in, or you're like, I don't know if it's worth it. You're going through hard family times. You're not doing as well as you want. You're struggling. You're getting setbacks. And I think those thoughts come to a lot of people. I had them at different times. Is to really get help. When you see that, nothing is worth taking your life for. And I think some of the creating a normalcy around getting help, mental health. I went to therapists, along the way as I faced different struggles in my life. We need help. We can't make it alone. But sometimes when you're in an insular class of 100 people, and your scores are up every day, or even if the scores aren't posted, but those guys, they studied for a day and crushed it, and you're working for 2 weeks, just trying to get immunology to stick in your head, or whatever it is. And the pressure to do that, you cut back on caring for yourself. You cut back on that because you want the 90 versus the 70 versus the, and in the most genuine sense, it's because you want to be a good doctor.
Yeah.
In the more basal sense, you're competitive, you want to be better. Who knows? And probably varies back and forth at different times in how you think about things. But just that perspective, and I think it's hard. And when I was talking about how you look back, what do you know? Embracing where you are in the journey. Med school is hard.
Yeah.
Residency is hard. Not being good at stuff when you're a smart, talented person is hard. And I think it's that disconnect, and then being in an environment where you're around incredibly successful people. I mean, everybody that went to med school was their top whatever X% of their class. This is not your kids from your small town. This is everybody's been filtered to a really high achieving group of people, which is fun to be around. But then I think you're also young, and you're developing your sense of self, your sense of security, the things that give you meaning in life, and you don't get the reward from your job. You're struggling to keep up. It's really intense, and I think a lot of schools are going to pass-fail. I don't know if that will help. I don't know if, but I don't know what to do about the problem, because I think it's somewhat inherent to both the system and the people
Yeah.
that come. And I think the best thing that I know, the things that helped me when I was struggling, depressed, struggling at different times, which is normal for all of us going through it, is to get help, to go see a
Yeah.
therapist, to acknowledge it. And if you need to take a break, to move, whether maybe it's a different friend group, maybe you need to not hang out with different people. It's like when you look on Twitter and you're like, oh my goodness, all these people published all these papers. These professors are so much more successful than me. Am I my success is to take care of my patients really well, to make some progress, to mentor my handful of students working with me, to try to teach our residents to be great surgeons. Like, I don't have to be the guy that cured this disease, or I don't have to keep up with them. And like, maybe sometimes you need to turn off the Twitter, or go see a therapist, or it's a friend group. Maybe you have some friends who constantly make you feel not good enough.
Yeah.
So trying to find some support in that, I think, is really essential, because you see this throughout your career over the time, this resident died, and it's a suicide, and you're like, it's just such a loss. And nothing in life is worth that.
Yeah. Is there anything in the immediate future that you're personally excited about?
As far as on the clinical front, or what are you thinking?
Yeah. As far as healthcare, clinical front, projects that you're working on.
One of the things that makes my job the most fun is really trying to push the boundaries of what we can do. And I study a particular tumor called meningioma a lot. I take care of meningiomas, pituitary schwannomas, the most common diseases I treat. But a lot of my research expertise is in meningioma. And one of the things that made it really interesting to me, because I studied cancer biology, gene regulation, gene transcription, which goes awry in cancer, in my PhD and then in my postdoc in residency, I began to apply it to meningioma. And it was a field where it's not a cancer. Meningiomas are what generally fit in what we call like the benign tumor category, or non-malignant. So they grow, they cause problems, they're treated with surgery and radiation, but they don't kill you most of the time in a year or two, like glioblastoma or some of the really aggressive brain cancers. And so it's often been underfunded. So for me, what we've seen as a field over the last 10 years is an explosion in the molecular knowledge, because as kind of the trickle-down technologies, understanding of gene sequencing, understanding of gene mutations, in meningiomas, they lose different arms of chromosomes that make the tumors more malignant. I've been involved in projects using a technology called DNA methylation sequencing that looks at different components of how the marks on the DNA that show our genes on or off. And by doing that, we're being able to better understand the biology of the tumors that I care for. And by understanding the biology, we can then translate that and say, hey, these tumors are overactivated in this part of the cell cycle, so we can try a molecular therapy that's targeted to that. And no chemotherapy, no medical treatment has worked for meningiomas that's ever been proven with any significant degree of success. So the only things they have are surgery and radiation. So what we're seeing and doing trials on are trialing different therapies with medications that are directly based on the mechanisms that we've discovered in the lab and others have discovered and defined and characterized. And the research we're doing to actually apply that and say, hey, based off your methylation sequencing, based off the way your tumor looks and the way we used to classify it, you're really high risk. But when we look at your methylation profile, or we have a gene panel we have developed that's almost in press, it should be out soon. We sent the revisions back in to predict with a greater accuracy the risk of your recurrence. And then for the first time, we have a genetics panel that would say you would respond to radiation or not. We actually have a randomized trial open at Northwestern and at multiple sites around the country, randomizing patients to 6 weeks of radiation or observation. Just because there's true equanimity. And we have a marker, a biomarker, looking at this panel, a gene panel that can say, hey, these patients actually could really benefit from radiation. Or on the flip side, hey, your tumor looked bad under the microscope, but it's not that bad of an actor molecularly and at the genetic level, so let's just watch you. And I think that's what I'm excited about, is being really on the forefront of that from a neuropathology standpoint. We do all the latest sequencing. And because of my research background and involvement, I actually can try to translate that in a meaningful way for our patients.
Yeah.
So that's a really exciting situation to be in when I talk to patients and say, hey, we really need to ramp up your care because this is a bad tumor. Don't sit on it. Or, hey, let's dial it back, because we can look at the biology of the tumor and say, hey, we couldn't do this 10 years ago. We couldn't do it 5 years ago. We couldn't do it 3 years ago. And we're really like beginning to have new insights that can inform patient decision-making and their care. Similar to that, there's some molecular agents that we're applying with PET scan that can really define a meningioma. And often they can sometimes grow in areas where it's difficult on an MRI to say, is this the edge or that the edge? Or they can not even show up on the MRI, but the cells have gone farther. And this is really sensitive. So if I take out most of your tumor, but it's going in a critical area, so I leave some of it, and then we were going to treat you with radiation, if we just radiate what we saw in the MRI, we might be missing some of the tumor. But by using these, dotatate is the name of it, it's a somatostatin receptor analog, a special kind of PET scan, we can actually get a better definition of where that tumor is. And then when you treat with radiation, some of the studies from Europe that have done this before in certain types of meningiomas and others suggest that the tumor control is much better because we're not missing the edges that kind of go out. So I think being able to use those types of scans, integrate them in the OR, say, hey, can I push it? And it looks like it's almost normal, but I know there's tumor cells in there because of this, so we can then kind of push further. I think we can get better surgeries. And then when I see the patients, by understanding their biology and molecular profiling of their tumor, we can then say, hey, this is where your risk strata is. We should watch you really closely. Or you know what? Hey, I'll see you in 6 months, or I'll see you in a year. This is a not aggressive tumor. It looked weird. People were worried. You were worried. We got you through surgery. Go live your life. Like I gave you the chapter 2 now, this next chapter. Let's open that. This is the post-care. If it comes back, we'll deal with it then. We'll keep an eye on it. We're not letting you go. We want to always have you protected and safe, but it gives us that confidence to go there. And it's intellectually interesting,
Yeah. Wow.
So that's what makes it fun.
That's amazing. That's incredible. If you want to be found, where can someone find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Stephen T. Magill. My Instagram is Stephen T. Magill, Magill, and Stephen with a Phen. There's a lot of different ways. Or just search me up on the internet. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on the Northwestern website. If you want an appointment, just go there. The number's on the website. I'd be happy to see you, take care of you.
Thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure.
Great to talk with you.
Thanks for sharing. I think you're gonna make a lot of people happy, just like sharing your experiences and your wisdom, and I think there's a lot to pull from this episode for even people that aren't pre-med or interested in healthcare. It's just so much wisdom. It's just like it's not specific to our industry.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and I feel really fortunate to be where I've been. It's not all, the journey has a lot of ups and downs, but it's a great career, and I think there's one thing to leave people with. It's just, remember, just be where you are.
Yeah. It's to experience, acknowledge the ups and the downs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
But it's fun.
Well, guys,
good to see you, Victor.
thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys in the next episode. See ya.